fears and turn them into their confidence. You work too hard for this many years. You spend 40 years of your life doing everything you can to secure your family. We don't want you waking up every day saying, what if, or what happened yesterday in the market? Does it change how we live our lives today? We're going to take on the heavy lifting so you can do what you want to do.
I had a lot of church members and other staff members coming to me for investment advice. I was literally sitting in a Wednesday night service, and the individual that was speaking was talking about life cycles and going through your 30s to your 40s, 50s, 60s, and so on. And he says, what people really need is some kind of a life plan. And I thought, bingo. That's exactly what I'm doing in a financial sense.
Creativity, integrity, quality. If we can create those three things for people, they feel valued, they feel like there's somebody, not a number. We know we're not from New York, we're Michigan, we're Lansing, we're Howell. So what we do here is we say, let's build out custom things. Let's put creativity into the plan, something that's built around you. We can't stand cookie cutter. Each person has individual goals. And from there, we're going to create individualized plans.
I think what I want people to understand is that there's two standards. One is suitability and one is fiduciary. Suitability means based on your age, a large cap fund would be suitable for you. It means nothing about whether the fees are low or whether it's a good fund. It is just suitable. But a fiduciary means that I would market this product to you based on it's best for you. The fees are low, the returns are good. So the fiduciary standard is basically the golden rule with legal teeth. A fiduciary standard is a standard above suitability. That having a servant's heart is really a key to having good service for your clients. And the clients know it.
When you are expecting a baby, one of the best days of your journey is the ultrasound day. It's the day you finally get to find out if you're having a boy or a girl. I remember we would pull into the parking lot and have the same discussion every time. Do we park in the blue stork or the pink stork? Now, we had two kids at this point. I remember specifically pulling in back in 2014 into the hospital in Owasso, Memorial Hospital. And as we pull in, we have the same discussion. And then we go up the stairs and we sit in this waiting room. Then we finally end up in the ultrasound room. And it's cold and it's dark. And eventually the ultrasound tech comes in and she starts taking pictures. Well, after a while, she says the question we've been waiting for. Do you want to know? I said, yeah, we want to know. She goes, all right, there it is. It's a boy. And if you've had a boy, you know what I mean when they say, there it is, it's a boy. And then we turn and we're excited and we hug and kiss. And in my mind, I thought, this is great. We already have two boys. The room's already painted. My honey-do list just got really short. You know, we have all the clothes and everything. But we go into this conversation and she keeps on taking pictures. And now we're talking about what do you want to name this kid? Because when we got married, we had it all figured out. We're going to have 4 kids, 2 girls, 2 boys. And we had names for both. But we had burned through the 2 boy names already, and we needed to find a 3rd good one. And so we're talking about that, and who are we going to tell? How are we going to tell them? And she keeps on taking pictures. Then finally, after a while, this ultrasound tech leaves, and our doctor comes in. Her name's Dr. LaForest. And she says, Mike and Kimberly, let's talk about your son. You see, we took pictures, and on his brain we saw a cyst. And she then started telling us all this medical stuff, and it flew right past me, because as soon as she said there's a cyst on his brain, I went into my own little world of, holy cow. And I probably should have paid better attention, but I was just like, what is happening? And then finally she finishes, and I say, is there anything else? Well, yeah, his feet, they're curled up like this. They're bending really bad. So what does that mean? Well, he'll need braces and therapy and maybe surgeries and casts, and eventually he'll walk, but he'll be no athlete. Is there anything else we should cover while we're here? She says, no, that's it. Thank you very much. So then we hold hands and walk down the sidewalk, and we sit in our car, and we kind of sit silently for several minutes. Then finally I look at Kimberly and I said, well, we should pray. So we prayed and asked God for a miracle, and then we drove home. 4 weeks go by, and we finally get to come back for another ultrasound, and it might as well have been 4 months. That was a long time to wait when you're just sitting in this space. And we come back in for another ultrasound, and I'm really expecting that they're just going to say, hey, it was a mistake. it's all resolved itself, no big deal. And so we go up the stairs and through the lobby, and we're in the ultrasound room. And as we're sitting there waiting, the ultrasound tech takes her pictures. Then Dr. LaForest comes in and says, we need to talk about your son. See, last time you were here, there was a cyst on his brain, but now there's 3 cysts, and they've spread around his brain. What does that mean? Again, a bunch of more medical stuff and all these things, and probabilities and statistics and everything else. Well, how about his feet? Well, they're still really bent up. He'll be no athlete, but eventually he'll walk. I said, thank you very much, and we left. See, we already had 2 boys, and everything went perfectly well. I think being pregnant is super easy for me, right? Harder on Kimberly, but it's easier on me. But it was an easy process we went through. No issues in the ultrasounds, no issues in the deliveries. Everything was smooth, and now we go for our 3rd time. I'm thinking it's going to be the same thing as always, but this was different. And as you keep hearing, every time we talk to a doctor, we got worse news, worse news. And you're thinking, all right, well, what does our life look like from here? Do we need a different car? Do we need to change the way our house operates? Do we need to move somewhere without stairs? What are these things going to be for the next several years? And your mind can go to a lot of places. And then you have to go sit and wait another 4 weeks till another ultrasound. You see, it's not that we were doing anything wrong or different, but every time we met with a doctor, it felt like we had less control, and our future was more in jeopardy or up in the air. Well, finally, 4 weeks later, we come back in for our last ultrasound of our son. We go in, and she takes her pictures, and we just kind of sit there in silence. And then she leaves, and Dr. LaForest comes in. And Dr. LaForest now grabs the little clicker in the machine, and she's taking pictures. As you can imagine, we kind of look at each other and go, what now? What's next? And then after a few minutes, she goes, let's talk about your son. We've looked all around his brain, and we can't find any cysts anywhere. And I said, that's awesome. I want you to be really sure, because this would be a bad mistake. Like, can you double check? She goes, we've looked everywhere. There's nothing. She goes, and she said the phrase, well, you got your miracle. And I think that's pretty cool. So we were like, that's great. Well, tell me about his feet. Nah, his feet are still really curled up. He'll be no athlete, but again, he'll walk. It's just going to be a journey. I said, okay, we can work with that. Thank you so much. And then we left. 12 weeks go by, and we finally get to meet our son. Mother's Day weekend 2014. It's Saturday night. We're at my parents celebrating Mother's Day, and Kimberly goes into labor. 7:48 p.m., Caleb Isaac Douglas is born, and he is small. I mean, small. 6 pounds, like 4 ounces or something like that. And quite the opposite end of the spectrum I was when I came out. And so this little tiny baby, and I'm holding him, and it's the best Mother's Day gift we could hope for. You have your son, and I'm holding him, and he's so small, and his feet are curled up. So literally, as I'm holding him, his feet are kind of like this. I said, okay, but he's healthy, we're good. The next day, this pediatrician comes in, the one who works at the hospital. We've never met him before. He doesn't know our story, our journey, or any of the stuff we've been through over the past 20 weeks. He walks in, and he says, I'm here to check on Caleb, as he's looking at the chart. I said, yeah, doc, check his feet out. Let me know what you see. So he takes his feet, and they're all bent up like this, and he bends them out, bends them in, and he bends them out. And he said this exact phrase, and I'll never forget it. He said, man, this kid is flexible. He's going to be quite an athlete. I mean, the exact phrase we had been hearing the whole time. And as you can imagine, right when he says that, Kimberly and I kind of look at each other, and it all just like washes over. It's a lot. We had been on this journey dealing with this for 20 weeks. And every time it felt like, man, can we get one piece of good news in life? But yet it was just 20 weeks out of our whole life. But it felt like an eternity. Then fast forward, about a year later, we're in an ultrasound room preparing for our daughter. And as they come, we go in for our daughter's ultrasound to find out that she's our daughter. And they said, all right, well, it's a girl. And just so you know, there's a little spot on her brain, a little cyst. I said, that's going to take care of itself. And it did. It went away, and it went away by the next appointment. But the way you see things, the way you experience life, shapes the way you see the world. Your experiences shape your expectations. When we saw that, now our ultrasound tech was brilliant. She's very smart, and she's doing her job. And she wasn't being rude or anything. She's just telling us what she sees for our benefit, to let us know. But then, as you can imagine, if I see an ultrasound room, my mind goes back to not just the bad times, but the good times. The celebration we had when they said, hey, his brain's clear. We're like, that's great. And so that shapes the way we see the world. And for a lot of people over the last several years, we've been through some experiences that shape the way we see the world. If you're near retirement or in retirement, and you were retired in 2020, when we had the fastest 30% crash in the history of the stock market. If you lost a lot of money in 2007, 8, or 9, if you worked for GM in 2007 here, I mean, Lansing understands the 2008 financial crisis better than most places in the country. We lost multiple GM plants. We lost jobs more than just about anybody else besides Detroit in the whole country. And when you go through that, as soon as the market dips or pulls back, you go, here we go again. I've seen this movie. I remember this. As we go through talking about retirement tonight, the goal is to cover the things that you can control. You can't control the stock market, neither can we. As much as we'd love to as money managers, you can't control the stock market. We can just determine how much of an effect it has on your life. You see, the finances we save, the things we have, those are the conduit to the life we want to live in retirement. We save not just to have money, but so one day when we retire, we can travel the world. We can go see our family. We can check things off our bucket list. We can go snowbird and not be here during the bad weather for several months a year. We have one client, she told me, we just got to be 6 weeks somewhere not here. I don't care if it's South Carolina, Florida, Texas, Arizona, somewhere not in Michigan during the snow season. I said, 6 weeks isn't going to cover it. We get ice in April. You need to have a longer time. Every year, you guys know what I'm talking about. We get beautiful weather and then an ice storm in the middle of April. Blows my mind how people are surprised by it every time. But that's what the money does. Your life savings is not an account. It's your life savings, and the goal of that life savings is to give you the life you want in retirement. So as we talk tonight about different things, the goal is just to make sure you have a firm educational understanding of these things, to dispel some of the myths or confusions or rumors about retirement, to make sure that we're talking very analytically, not opinion-based or politically, but what the finances and economics actually say, and then making sure that we are prepared for the what-ifs of the future. So that's our goal tonight, to do all of that and then eat really good steak, right? That's the goal for the evening. And so what normally happens is we get to this point, we say, all right, and we click our next slide, and we move into the next point. But as we were talking about preparing for this evening, Brian and I were going over it, and I said, let's just talk about what people want to talk about. Let's find out. So we brought a whiteboard, and our goal here is just to hear what you want to talk about. Now, we sent you a flyer, and there's a bunch of stuff on the list, and maybe it was just the picture of the steak, and that's okay. But if there's anything you're wondering about, let's talk about it. So we're going to make a list of subjects you guys want to cover, and then we'll talk about them. Now, we've never done a joint whiteboard like this. It's very interesting for us as we're trying this out. So you guys are our first group we've ever done it. So if we trip on each other a little bit in terms of words, or I cut him off, he cuts me off, give us a little grace. But we're going to have some fun and just educate, more of a, not a lecture, but a workshop. So let's talk about what you guys want to talk about. Is there anything in particular you guys said, hey, you know what? We're planning for this. We're thinking about this. I've been hearing this. Can we talk about it? And we'll cover it. What do you guys want to talk about tonight? Steve, you've always got stuff to talk about. What do you want to talk about tonight, Steve?
Did you expect the best?
Yep. Anything on our checklist? Anything in notes you guys have? Anything preparing?
Obviously,
The future. Future of the market or the future of, that's broad, because I got a lot of stuff about the future.
no, well, the meaning of the market, future, because my view of the future is not all rosy.
Okay.
From financial crisis.
So you want
I think
the Oracle of Okemos to come in and tell you what's going to happen?
Exactly.
I'll see what I can do. All right, let's talk about guaranteed future market tips is what Steve would like.
I told him, the crystal ball.
The crystal ball, we'll get it out and we'll see how we do. What's it, the Johnny Carson, the Karnak? Mm-hmm. Market future, really some economic future we'll get in there too. What else? What else do you guys want to talk about? Some long-term care protection? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, some kind of.
Yeah. Shielding of some sort, or what the options are. 'Cause that's really the whole thing, is if we understand the best options, then based on what your family, what makes the most sense for you, we'll cover that for sure. That's a good one. What else?
We thought about that as well. That's been on our mind, long-term health care,
Yeah,
to cover yourself,
yeah.
medications in.
You know, I think some other part, right in there, Medicaid versus Medicare. That's a great one. You just brought up the Medicaid element. Because there's also, when it comes to long-term care, there's some myths, and there's some hard realities, right? And so you can, if you go online, you can find them both. And you're gonna, I talked about the experiences shaping your expectations. We have one client specifically I'm thinking of. We had a specific plan built for them for a long time. And then they came in about a year and a half ago and said, we have to protect against long-term care. They said it in such a very direct way. I said, who in your family just went into long-term care? And he goes, my mom did. How'd you know that?
Yeah.
I said, well, you made it very, like, we've never talked about it in 4 years of meetings, and instantly we need to do it. I said, what is she paying, like $7,000 or $8,000 a month? He goes, well, $6,000 a month, but man, it's gonna drain everything she's got. We have to, so again, what you're experiencing or seeing your family go through shapes the way you see the world a little bit. But we'll definitely, Medicaid versus Medicare, that's an interesting one. How you get your long-term care paid for determines sometimes based on what disease puts you in there. What else? Anything else we have on our list?
My wife wants to better understand some of your social security numbers.
In terms of,
When you can draw.
oh, yeah, Social Security. Yeah, absolutely. Social Security planning. You know, a lot of times people leave that one alone, like they say, well, we'll just take it whenever we take it. That's a big piece. The timing is important. I had someone who just came in the other day and they said, we're gonna take it at 62. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, might as well, I'm not gonna let it sit. I said, are you both retiring? He says, no, we're both gonna keep earning. Well, between the two of them, they each earn about $130,000 a year. And I said, if you take it, they're gonna keep it all. And so I went through the same thing we're gonna go through, and we're gonna talk about how to plan that out, because he's like, well, I don't wanna give it away. I said, well, actually, by taking it, you're giving it away. So we'll cover that. That's a great one.
One more in the back.
Yeah, question on best way to start transferring some of the funds to kids and grandkids.
Yeah, generational transfers. That's a great one. All right.
Probably would include estate.
Yeah, estate planning will definitely be rolled into that. I think we should stop at 5 if we want to eat at a decent time. Because we did a workshop a couple of months back. We called it our legacy event, where we had our clients, they could bring in kids or grandkids, and we'll educate the kids and grandkids on how to save and what their future looks like. And I told Katie, I've got 5 points. I'll be done in about 45 minutes. And she's like, okay. And then about an hour and 20 minutes in, I said, hey, we're 3 points in. Serve the food. We're going to keep going. So we won't go that long, I promise you. What do you think, Brian? What do you want to start with?
Let's just go down the line. Market first.
All right. So let's talk about the market. It's interesting. We're actually doing a podcast this Monday specifically about the new way of looking at the market. There's a thing called fundamental analysis. It's a way of looking at a company, not at a stock. Warren Buffett is very famous for this, because what he does is he does not care about the ticker symbol or about the market price. He cares about the functioning finances inside the company. And so that's why he says, I don't buy stocks, I buy companies. So what you used to do, and for a long time, it was the model for investing. You go look at a company's earnings sheet, get all the reports. They call it the EBITDA, the earnings before interest, taxes, and appreciation. So they have all these things, and you look at these reports about the stability of the company, and that would accurately reflect the stock price. That was the model for a long time. Now I'm going to tell you a story about a company today. It's called Tesla. You may have heard of it. Tesla has had an insane boom of their stock price over the last 3 years. The owner, Elon Musk, bought Twitter. The day he bought Twitter, Tesla stock plummeted. Now let's talk about the financials of Tesla. They have a backlog of orders for 18 months. They have orders for the next 18 months. They have very efficient processes to keep their cash flows high. From a fundamental standpoint, the company looks really, really good. But because the owner bought another company, the price plummeted. Well, that's not fundamental analysis. That's a reactionary thing.
Yeah, he spent, what, 44 billion?
Yeah, of his own money selling off stock and keeping the money. That's the funny part. He sold it, but people bought it.
Yeah.
So the money still kept all the money. The company kept all the money still. And so it's interesting how that shifted to now much more emotional reactions. We look at last year. We had a 30% drop in the NASDAQ and a 20% drop in the S&P. And why? Well, there's a lot of reasons potentially why. We had incurred a lot of debt over the past couple of years. And I love when we say, well, this side's spending a lot of money. Well, they both spend a lot of money. It's just a matter of who says what number, right? They met in the middle at $2.2 trillion for the CARES Act. That was bipartisan. Everybody signed on for that one, right? So we have a lot of debt that was taken on. We had the constriction of supply that became an issue and kind of caught up to us, and so we had a pullback. And then this year, the market sprinted up, and now it's been pulling back for the last 3 months. Why? Well, there's a lot of questions as to why, but why would the market sprint up while they're raising interest rates and telling us inflation is 6, 7, 8%? It doesn't make any sense, economically speaking. It makes sense when you realize that there is just a lot of money in the market right now. And there's a lot of people who just assume it's going to go up. People who have a very short-sighted view of the market. Those who have been investing for 30 to 40 years, you're hard-pressed to find someone who says the market is in a great place. Those who've invested for the past 10 to 15 years, they say this is a great buying opportunity. We should be in right now. Because they don't remember 2001, 2, or 3, a 3 consecutive year drop. They don't know the effects of high interest rates and high inflation from the late 70s, early 80s. So those who don't know those numbers, there's an interesting study. People age 60 to 80 believe that 6% is a fair mortgage rate. A fair mortgage rate. People age 40 to 60 believe that 4.5% is a fair mortgage rate. People under the age of 40 believe that 3% is a fair mortgage rate. A fair mortgage rate. It's historically good. But what's their perspective? When did they buy homes if you're between 20 and 40? In this historically low interest rate period. And so they just think all they know is really their investing period has only been since 2009. So they're dumping money in the market consistently, while those who are the largest generation of wealth ever to come through our country, baby boomers, are doing what's good for them and what's bad for the economy. Pay off your debt, you don't take on new debt, you decrease the risk in your portfolios, and you keep extra cash on hand. All of that is really good for the individual, and you should do it. It's just bad for the market. The market floats on debt. The more mortgages we sell, the more personal loans we give, the more this money cycle keeps going around. You give money to a bank, they make $9 off of it, and then they give it back to you, like the whole thing. And we have the largest generation in history pulling back and doing the things that make sense for their family, but it's not good for the market. So what does the next 10 years hold in the market? Well, volatility, you can guarantee that. Because as we go through a generational wealth transfer, from this generation to the next, we're going to see an interesting shift. Think about in terms of companies. If you have a 65-year-old retire from GM who's an engineer, he's worked his way up to $160,000, $170,000 a year and made a real nice living and been on the line or doing his thing for 25, 30 years. He retires and he's replaced with a 40-year-old. Does the 40-year-old jump in at $165,000? No. They jump in much lower. And so for the last years, the person who gets to that age 40, then 45, then 50, their lifestyle grows with their income. The home they buy, the college they're paying for, all the things that they do, it grows over the years. And as a result, their debts will increase because they go from the $200,000 house to the $400,000 house. They go from the, what we always used to joke about, like the tax refund cars at Sundance, what it used to be, before the cash for clunkers got them all off the road. But now every car you buy, if it's less than 3 years old, is 40 grand basically, 30 to 40 grand, and everything's going through the roof. So now our spending is higher and higher. Right now, across the board, nationally, credit card debt is the highest it's ever been in history. Credit card debt hit like $1.4 trillion, averaging out to $18,000 per citizen. That's a lot. It's a lot of debt. And yet, we're still going and pushing on this track. So what do I think the future holds? Well, we know taxes are going up in 3 years. It's already written into law. The tax code is going to go back to where it was before the Tax and Jobs Act, and that's in 3 years. Since that was written, we've taken on almost $10 trillion of national debt from 2018 until present. We're going to have much more volatility. When you have explosive growth in technology sectors, you have explosive growth, and then you have 2022. And then you're going to have explosive growth. And so you think of it like this rubber band that gets stretched as far as it can go, and then right before it snaps, you let it come all the way back. And then it can stretch a little farther, and then a little farther. But the only way to keep stretching that out farther is to let it retract back, and then you stretch it again. That's the way our market's going to be for probably the next 10 years, until the generation below the baby boomer generation grows into the higher earnings, the higher income, and the higher levels of debt that will float the country. It's a long answer to a short question, what's going to happen in the future of the market. But to say, well, it's going to be good this year, who knows, right? They're going to raise interest rates most likely in October, and they won't bring interest rates down until earliest I'm hearing is like April or May, but most likely fourth quarter of next year. So another full year of slowing down the real estate market, slowing down the car market, slowing down the personal loans. And what happens when those happen? We'll see unemployment creep up. We'll see these things move. They all move in a certain way, and it's designed to pull back the economy to a global rate, which means the market historically would reflect that. So for the next year to year and a half, the market should be pretty rough. However, I made the joke today, I said, one thing's for sure, I believe in election years. Election years, everybody does whatever they can to manipulate numbers, both sides, to make it look their way, right? If you're the incumbent, you find a way to make it look good. If you're the opponent, the challenger, you are finding every way to make it look bad. And the market takes a toll as a result of it. So I think it's a good time for the next year to know how to play it safe the best you can. I had one person who said, should I take my money out of the bank and bring it into the market? I said, this is the first time in 20 years you can actually make money in the bank. Right? Why? Like, at least throw, there's CDs, there's billboards everywhere around Lansing right now. What's the one? Community Credit Union. 5.15% CDs. You know, money market accounts, 4%. Now you know if they're giving you that, they're getting it on the back end because every loan is 8 to 9%. But who cares? If you're not taking out those loans, go make some money safely in the bank, keep it insured the best you can. But the volatility is going to be very high for the next 10 years. As we transition generations, this will not be the 80s and 90s where it just runs up. This is going to be a major transition that we go through, and it's not a quick one. But it's going to come with great growth and great recovery of the rubber band. Okay? So that's the market for the next couple of years. Let's talk about Social Security planning next. Because a couple of these are going to tie together. These three really tie together. Yeah. Social Security planning. Brian, why don't you walk through with them? I'll start drawing up something about when they can start taking Social Security.
One of the most common questions we get in the office, kind of like we alluded to tonight a bit, is one of the first things usually is, when should I start Social Security? I'm 61, I'm 62, I'm 60, I'm whatever age. When should I start Social Security? And it sounds weird, but I love giving the answer, I don't know. Because everybody is so different, right? Somebody could be, like he was talking about, still working for a long time, and if you take it too early, you're going to give it all back. Sometimes the answer is one spouse now, one spouse later. If somebody's much older or younger, it really can make sense to start one sooner, wait on the other one to build back up, or build up to a certain number that fits a hole in the plan, and then take it at that point. Or sometimes it just makes sense that a check that clears is better than one that's promised, right? So take it at 62 and go with it, because we don't know what's happening. So it's a weird answer to say, I don't know, but I like giving it because I like more finding out when it makes sense. I'm a results-based person. You know, for example, in the house, I like to vacuum, oddly enough, because I like putting the lines in the carpet. I like the results of that. So if I can have the result of filling a hole in a plan with something as simple as Social Security, I kind of get a kick out of it.
Yeah.
Where were you drawn?
So just as we talk about the timelines of it, so there's things we need to know, certain timelines. Anybody born 1960 or later, don't raise your hands. Actually, no, those would be the ones that would raise their hands. People born before 1960, don't raise your hands, right? 1960 is the point. If you were born 1960 or later, we need to know what your full retirement age, according to Social Security. It's 67. If you're born 1960 or later, there's a thing you'll see on every Social Security site. It's called FRA, full retirement age. Yours is 67. If you were born on this side of 1960, there's a sliding scale where it started at 65 and then it goes through. So most people are at that 66 and a half to 66 and 10 months range. But there's a certain number. And why do we care about full retirement age? Can you take it early? You can take it before that. You can retire. You don't have to wait to retire. That's just a Social Security calculation. So let's just take people born in 1960 or later, for example. If your magic age is 67, the only thing that applies to is when you get your full benefit without any restrictions. So for example, I mentioned earlier the client who, he's actually one of our Grand Rapids clients, and he came in and as he's talking, he says, well, if we retire now, we just want to turn on Social Security at 62. If you retire and take your Social Security, or you're working and taking Social Security, before your full retirement age, they have an income limit. The income limit right now is about $21,000. That's what you can earn and take your early Social Security without any penalties. That's a low number. Then what they say is, don't worry, it's not a hard and fast thing. For every $2 you earn over, they withhold $1.
It's highway robbery.
Yeah. That means literally when you go to take your Social Security, they're either going to settle up at the end of the year with it, or they're going to do their withholding, because when you're supposed to submit your projected earnings, so they're going to withhold it. So now it's gone, and it's gone, right? So what they do is they say, we're going to withhold it, but after age 70, we'll pay it out over your life expectancy. Never going to get it, right? But what they do is this calculation. So for example, if I earn $40,000, well, we know that 19,000 of it is over this limit, right? So out of this 19,000, for every $2, they're going to withhold $1 Social Security. So you can basically cut it in thirds, right? Out of 19,000, that's $6,333 per third. So that means I get 12. Now I've earned the full 40, but that means they're going to withhold $6,333 of my Social Security benefit this year, and then they're going to do it again next year. That's if you only earn 40,000. So it's a pretty quick equation to see if your benefit for the year, let's say it's $30,000. Well, that is 1/3 of 90,000. So that's kind of the breakover point. You say, what do I earn, and how far above 21,000 is it? So in this situation, if you have a $30,000 Social Security benefit, that's 1/3 of 90, because then 2/3, 60 would go to you. So if you have 90,000 plus the 21,000, if you have $111,000 of income, and you turn on your Social Security, you won't receive $1 of Social Security. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, is this on top of the windfall tax as well? Because I heard that certain individuals will be taxed, and it's called a windfall.
Yes. So this is completely separate. This is called provisional income. It's equations they use strictly to figure out how to tax your Social Security. Even though, if you remember, Social Security leaves your paycheck as a tax, right? Now they're going to tax it as ordinary income second time around. And so what they do is, if you take it before, this is only pre-full retirement age. Once you hit your full retirement age, no more income limit. You can earn $1 million and still get your full Social Security. So there's an equation that has to be run to figure out, well, if I retire at 63, and I want to take my Social Security at 62, should I do that? Because every year you let it wait, it grows by 8% compounding. Every year, all the way to age 70. So if you So when should I take Social Security is a complicated question. Because like Brian was saying, what if you say, I'm gonna wait because I really want this number. This is big. I want the 70 Social Security number. And as a result, to get there, I have to spend all of my savings to get me there. Because I want to retire at 60. But by the time I get there, I'm going to burn through everything. Well, that doesn't make any sense. So if you are retired, you should turn it on most of the time. But that's one of the things that goes into it, understanding the income limit. The other thing is understanding survivorship. A married couple, so my wife Kimberly and I, we're a couple years apart. And out of the two of us, so she stays at home with our family. I work, she stays home. So she's going to, we don't project anything really for our own Social Security future, right? Like we don't, if we get it, great, but I'm not planning on it. But in theory, if we retired today, she could get half of my benefit if she waits till full retirement age. It's called a spousal benefit. It was designed for the stay-at-home spouse or the spouse who earns less. So she can get up to half of mine. So if mine's $3,000 a month, she can get $1,500 a month. Even though she didn't put in her 40 quarters, the government recognizes the fact that her staying home with our family allows me to go work more and earn more. So she's allowed a spousal benefit. If you have that situation, or let's say you have two people who both worked and earned and contributed, one of you has $2,800 a month of Social Security, the other one has 22. When somebody dies, the larger benefit remains. So no matter who dies, so let's say, for example, and there's always a morbid exercise, but let's just say, statistically speaking, you'll live longer because you're a woman, and women, from an actuarial standpoint, live longer. So your Social Security is $3,000 a month, yours is $2,500 a month. You die earlier because you're a man, you actually get his $3,000 a month and your $2,500 goes away. So in dual earning families, sometimes it makes sense to hold out for one of you to age 70, but only one. Because if it's a gap, you want that larger Social Security benefit to be the remainder, especially if you have a pension that maybe only kicks in 50% survivorship or less. Then you build this model of take one, let the other one grow untouched. That way that's our survivorship because we don't need it just yet. So there's some moving pieces in terms of Social Security calculation. For us, Kimberly can't get half of mine until she hits her full retirement age anyways, and she's 2.5 years younger than me. So when I'm 70, she'll be 67 and a half. So there's some things that have to be calculated into it. And the last one is the taxation. How much of my Social Security do I want taxed?
Well, zero, right?
Zero, right? We want zero, but don't worry, they made the thresholds really low to guarantee they'll be able to tax you. So what they've said, I'm going to erase this stuff real quick. Any questions on the stuff I've covered so far?
So the spousal survivor only gets it when they retire?
So the spousal benefit is for the person who has lower or no income. So what happens is once you hit 62, you can apply for a spousal benefit, but it's going to be half of mine reduced by about 8%. It's not exactly 8 because it's a back-ended calculation, but it's about 8% per year reduction. So if it's $3,000 is my benefit at my full retirement age, then she would get at her full retirement age $1,500. But she wants to take it at 62. All right, well then cut it down to $1,420 and then $1,315. Let's say you work it down to $1,080 a month. She can take that at 62. And she can take that. I've got my thing going, and they're independent. So I don't have to file for her to take hers. But she's going to get a significantly lower number by taking it so early. So that's part of the equation. The survivorship, you don't have to wait for anything. It's just a matter of, let's say that, and we deal with this sometimes, let's say that the larger earner dies at 65 and the widow is 60. You can get a widow's benefit. You can get the 65 benefit even though you're 60 right now today, because the survivor gets that benefit. Well, what if we're both 60? There is a widow benefit you can turn on, even at age 60, that will allow you to get some help from the Social Security office. If you're disabled, you're able to get a disability benefit, even at a younger age, that's basically equivalent to your full retirement age. And here's one.
Also, if, like for instance, the higher income earner doesn't take Social Security until his full retirement age,
No, you would get the widow benefit would be your benefit, the full retirement age benefit.
Even though I never claimed it.
Correct. It'd be filing at that age. So it wouldn't be, she couldn't take your age 70 if you died at 67, but she could take your 67. And then there is this little hidden one that's built in there for the seasoned parents. If you are 62 or older and you have a child under the age of 18, you can collect a Social Security benefit for your children while you are, even though they're 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old, your kids can collect Social Security child benefits off of you. Hey. Don't get any ideas. Right. Steve says yes, she goes no. So, but that's something to know about, right? And it's a unique one. You don't see it very often, but you do come across it. Well, if you happen to know somebody, or you particularly say, I've got some pretty young kids for us, great, congratulations. Get all the money that's out there for you. If it's in there in the tax code, we always say all the time, taxes and the legal code, it's just the rules we have to play by. You just want to win, right? So that's that. The last one, I'm sorry, any other questions about this? You can see why we tell people there is no answer. When should I take Social Security? 65, right? You can't do that. You have to look at a lot of moving pieces. The last piece is how it's taxed. There's an equation I mentioned earlier. It's called provisional income. Provisional income is just the calculation they use to figure out if they're going to tax you again on Social Security. And it works like this. They have this, we'll call it PI, this provisional income equation, and they're going to add some stuff together. And if that hits this egregiously low number, they're going to tax you. The thresholds for married filing jointly, we'll use that one, and you can just cut them down a little bit. It's not a cut in half. The person who really gets hosed in this deal is the single person. But married filing jointly, 0 to 32,000, and then 32,000 to 43,000. If your provisional income, if this equation here equals 0 to $31,999, none of your Social Security is taxable. That's a pretty low number for retirement, for a married couple. If you're between 32,000 and 43,000, those dollars, 50% is taxed as ordinary income. It's not a 50% bracket, but how much of that Social Security is taxed. And then above that, 85%. So, how do they calculate this equation? Well, do you have a pension? Yeah, I have a pension. Okay. But they don't count Social Security because it's a Social Security tax equation. They do. They cut it in half, but they say, all right, between the two of you, what do you earn? Well, I'm 30 grand. My husband's, 35 grand. So between the two of us, $65,000. All right, well, don't worry. We won't count it all. Just half. So you take your Social Security total for the year, cut it in half. Any IRA distributions. If you take money from your 401k, not in a loan format, but if you take a distribution from your IRA, 401k, 403b, SEP, Simple, Keogh, Rollover IRA, any of those, it's counted in this equation. So you go to redo that kitchen or redo the bath, it counts. Here's one that always gets me. Municipal bond interest. Does anybody know the benefit of a municipal bond? It's tax-free. I don't pay any taxes on the interest, and that's correct. But they count that interest against you in the formula to figure out if they're going to tax your Social Security. Isn't that some stuff? Hey, don't worry, we won't worry about that. There's some back-end stuff on these deals, don't have to worry about it. But up front, you don't pay any interest on that 5%, 6%. But yet, you can see it doesn't take much to end up not just here, but all the way over there. Well, why'd they come up with this equation? Well, there was no tax on Social Security until 1983. Then Congress passed a law that said, all right, we're just going to do this bracket. And then in 1993, they did this bracket. Even though when Social Security went into effect, there was one promise given, and that was never be taxed. Well, that lasted about 50 years. That's the other one, right? So those count against you. Well, what doesn't count against you? Roth IRA distributions, non-taxable life insurance distributions, things like that. But otherwise, they basically throw everything at you. Oh, I'm sorry, also 1099 interest. note where I just have CDs. And I didn't cash them in, and I rolled them over. But 1099 CDs, even if you don't take the money, do you get a 1099 and pay taxes on CDs? Yes, you do. And for once, you actually earned something on those CDs now. But that counts against you. But I didn't sell them. I never took the money out. If you get a 1099, it counts. If it's ordinary income, it counts. So going back into our decision of when do we take Social Security? Well, still working, still working, still working. It's hard to justify taking Social Security when you know that not only would I take, I'm going to have withholdings, the portions I do get, they're going to tax 85% of it. It's really hard to justify taking Social Security early if you're working and having a decent earning. It's just hard to justify it. And that's why we do love the question. We'll do a workshop, and someone will say, when should I take Social Security? And we've covered about 80% of the things that matter towards it. There's still more to go, but we're not going to cover it tonight. So there's a lot that goes into it, because we still have to leverage this against the rest of your portfolio to see if it makes sense.
So the person has planned very well their whole life, and their own personal funded retirement income is well over $40,000 a year. It's possible you could not get any Social Security.
Well, there's two things we're talking about. The withholding is different than the taxability, right? So remember that one we talked about before, the 21,000 income limit? That only applies to until your full retirement age. So if you're 67, they won't withhold any of your Social Security. They're just going to tax it, right? So they won't keep you from getting it, but let's just say you receive $30,000. 85%, that's not what they're going to take. It's the amount that's going to count as ordinary income in your tax returns. So if you're in a 12% bracket on $30,000, 85% of it is going to be taxed at that progressive tax system. And therefore, you'll end up paying, I don't know, right around $3,000 in taxes on Social Security. So there's, right? I wish it was just a simple, hey, 65. That'd be so much easier. And, but the calculations are kind of complex.
That makes sense.
I like Brian's answer better. I have no idea.
I have no idea, right? That's the right answer.
That's what we start with, Steve.
Right. And I'll tell you, we have layers of software that all integrate these different conversations, because when we make the decision, you also do have a look back. I don't know if you know this, but once you turn Social Security on, you have up to a year to say, sorry, that was a mistake. You just have to pay back what you took. So just cut them a check and they're cool with it. But you have up to 12 months and 1 day to have a mulligan. Say, I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. Here's $27,000. I'd like to let it grow. I've never seen anybody do it yet, but you could. So it's easier just to move some other stuff around than to deal with all that. It seems like a great way to invite the government more into your finances than necessary. So,
And Mike, just for clarity on that 43.
Yep.
Once you get past the 43, it's 85%.
there's no extra tier yet, right? I mean, they weren't ever going to tax it, and we made it a good 50 years.
Wait for that third tier. So
And then
what you're probably
yeah.
asking is, if I have X amount, how much of that is going to get taxed? And just like you said, fortunately, it's probably a good problem that you're over 42K.
Yeah.
Right? That's a good problem to have. And at the same time, you're like, well, I don't want to pay the tax.
Right.
So, but
You
it
just-
does threshold at 42.
Right. You just need to know the numbers, because we live in the net. We live on net numbers, right? So I can take out whatever I want out of my accounts, but by the time I finish taxes, there's that great, it was a Friends episode where Rachel gets her first paycheck and she looks at it and goes, who's FICA and why'd they take all my money? It's that example of you live on the net number. So we just need to understand net numbers in retirement, because rather than our employer taking care of all that nonsense, you have to take care of it all. So now we have to make sure we do all the proper withholdings to say, if you need $6,000 a month net to live off of, just understand we need to properly adjust your Social Security withholdings, properly adjust your withholdings from your investment accounts. Make sure that we have these things built into the plan, because you just don't want to get to March and have a bad surprise. So,
If you decide to buy that RV,
yeah,
tell your financial advisor first.
exactly.
Okay?
Yeah, and that's what, all these conversations, they can be handled in advance. I say all the time, the financial advisor's job is just to figure out how to say yeah, not to tell you no. The job is to figure out, hey, yeah, if you want to buy the RV, let's do that. But just so you know, we need to adjust these little things. We're going to move some pieces around on the puzzle to make sure it all fits together still. But based on interest rates, based on this, based on future projections, we need to do it this way. And so that's the reason for all the planning. All right, let's go into asset protection. This is a fun one.
More fun than Social Security tax?
More fun than Social Security tax. Because it's fun to, the good part about asset protections is that you have assets to protect. And so we have this long-term care. So let's talk about long-term care for just a moment. When we talk about how you receive care, there's a couple different ways you can receive care. You can have in-home care by a spouse, in-home care, and by the way, the spouse can be paid by insurances or the government things to care for the spouse. You can have in-home care from a professional. You can go to a skilled nursing facility that's not a full-on home, or you can go into a full-on home with varying degrees depending on how many activities of daily living you can accomplish. So when we look at long-term care, we hear the horror stories. 10 grand a month, right? $120,000 net, right? You have to pull out to pay for that. That's 5 or 6 activities of daily living you can't accomplish for the most part. The numbers say that the average person who goes into a long-term care facility is there for 2.4 years outside of Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is closer to 7 years. But 2.4 years for pretty much everything else. The average cost for that person is about $4,500 to $5,000 a month. Okay, well, that's about 40 to 60 grand a year for 2.5 years means about $100,000 to $120,000. That's not as debilitating as the 10 grand a month for 2.5 years. The more intense the care, more often the shorter the duration of the stay. So as a result, we just want to understand the different ways we can protect. One of those things is to understand what it is, who's going to pay, Medicaid or Medicare. Depends on the sickness or disease or the cause for you to go in. There's a great book called the Medicaid Planning Handbook by Alexander Beauvais Jr. And he goes through and details out, well, did you know that if you have this disease, if you have this incident, and it puts you in a long-term care, your Medicare will cover it for a while. That'd be pretty nice. Cover it for the $140 a month of premium, that's a real good deal. But if it's these other diseases, Medicare won't pay for any of it. So Medicaid in every form is what's basically deemed low asset, low income insurance. The only way Medicaid will ever kick in any facet of life is out of a need. So if you have $1 million in your retirement accounts, that is not deemed a need. It's only once you spend down. So if the disease that puts you in is not covered by Medicare, you are on the hook for all of the cost of your insurance, of your care, I should say. So when will Medicaid kick in? We are in what's called a Medicaid spend down state. Medicaid spend down means that they want you to burn through all of your assets to a certain point, and then they'll gladly help out once you become low income, low asset. So for a single person, you have to spend down to right around $3,000. That's it. You have to sell the home, you have to sell the car. Unless it's protected by an irrevocable trust, you have to spend it all. If you're married, they have what's called the community spouse, the one who doesn't go in, and then the care spouse, the one who does go in. The community spouse is allowed to keep, I believe the number right now is $130,000 of assets, about $2,500 a month of income, your car, your home, cash value life insurance up to about $2 grand, and a burial plot. That's it. So if you have 2 cars, one has to be sold. If you have a second home, one would have to be sold. If you have $1 million, you have to spend on, it's $130,000 or 50% of your assets, whichever is less. So if you start out with 150, you have to spend down to 75,000. If you have $1 million, you have to spend down to $130,000. You can keep your car, keep your home, because they're not going to kick you out of your home because your spouse went in. But that was the rules for spend down. So understanding that Medicaid is low income, low asset coverage. So the goal is never to qualify, right? We don't want to qualify for Medicaid. Just like being taxed on Social Security is a privilege, right? We get to be taxed because we have more than $43,000 provisional income. So Medicaid, we don't ever want to use because you have to spend down. Medicare only covers a handful of things. And even then, there's a limit. So it won't cover, at best, it'll give you some coverage, but most likely not much. So you can protect yourself with one of a couple ways. There's traditional long-term care insurance. Think of it like homeowners insurance or auto insurance. You really don't want to have to use it, but when you need it, it's nice to have it there. So the first one is a long-term care insurance. Historically, they've been use it or lose it policies. You pay in, if you get rated young, 60, 55, 60 years old, it's pretty low cost. And they say, good news, we'll pay you out $105 a day benefit or whatever the number is. And it's a really appealing thing. And then at 60, they say it's going to cost you $125 a month. That's great to have everything protected. That sounds good. Then by the time you're 65, they're like, hey, it's about $150 a month now. Not much of an increase. But remember, we're going to cover all this stuff. Then about age 73, the premiums start going up like this. On most policies, where they start going up and up. By the time you actually need them, 75, 76, 77, 78, they've become a couple $1,000 sometimes a month. They get astronomically high on bad policies. Now you can buy fixed policies, however, generally the benefit is lower and the cost is higher early. But it's an actuarial game for them. They know that if you need care, well, about the time you need it, it's gonna be pretty expensive, so we're gonna charge it to you. And oftentimes it's use it or lose it. Now you can get some that have a death benefit, but the death benefit generally equals basically what you've put into it. There's a company called One America, I think is the one. They have one where over the course of 25 years, if you've put in $4,000 a year for 25 years, if you die, they'll give you $100,000 back to your spouse or your beneficiaries. So I got my money back, which isn't bad. However, they don't cover a whole lot. That's the trade-off for getting your money back. So I'm not a big fan of these type of insurance policies because it feels a bait and switch. It feels like, oh, it's really cheap, don't worry about it in the future, and then by the time you need it, they start really taking it from you. So that's big. I'm not a big fan of long-term care insurance. The next one, well, it's cash, right? That's the one. You just try to build your assets to the point where you can segment some off and say, if we need it 2.4 years at an average cost of 50 to 60 grand a year, we have enough to self-insure. And you can do that. The third option is an annuity. There are annuities you can buy that have these long-term care riders. There's goods and bad elements of that. Number one, if you buy an annuity, and I do like some annuities and I do hate some annuities, but what I believe is that what makes sense for this purpose of this money, right? I mean, we're in football season. I just came from my son's football game right before this. And when you watch 11 players on the field, they're all out there doing something different. Now, unfortunately, this is 7th grade tackle, so really they all just huddle together and kind of run in a mass, right? But good football, they're all doing something different, but they're all running the same play. But yet the center does something different than the guard or the tackle or the wide receiver, the running backs, the quarterback. They're all doing something different, but all moving in sync. So in your portfolio, sometimes we give money a purpose. And if you buy an annuity for your long-term care insurance, we're basically saying that's your job. You probably won't earn much, but at least you'll give me some protection in the future. When they give it back to you, they're giving you just faster access to your own money. Most annuities, if have a long-term care plan built into them, let's say you've put in $100,000 and it's grown to $200,000 by the time you need long-term care. You're basically going to get out $200,000 back to cover your long-term care. It's your own money. Now, sometimes there's a handful of contracts that we know that they actually do give you a really nice bump up, almost like life insurance. But understand what it's there for. You're basically taking this piece. It's a little bit of a sacrificial lamb. It's just for my long-term care. And then the last one is life insurance. Well, why would I buy life insurance? Isn't that for when you die? Well, that's one type. You get a whole life policy and you die and your family gets money. That's one. There's term insurance where basically it's young family insurance. I get enough to get us through while our kids are in the house and while we have a mortgage. But there are policies that are out there, they're whole life policies, that you can actually use the death benefit to tax-free pay for your long-term care. Now again, I think that there are some good life insurance policies, and I think there's a lot of bad ones. But if I can put in $100,000 over 10 years, let's say I pay in for 10 years or 5 years, whatever the number is, and now that I've put in the $100,000, I have a $400,000 death benefit. And I die tomorrow, well, my family gets $400,000 tax-free. That's nice for them, not so good for me. But what if I need long-term care? Well, the good policies say you can take about 96% of that death benefit, cut it into 4 payments, and they'll give it to you to pay for your long-term care, tax-free. So I put in 100, I can pull out about $380,000, tax-free, cut it into 4 or 5 payments, whatever the contract says. So I'm pulling out like $80,000, $90,000 a year, tax-free, to pay for my long-term care. But what they do, they're called indemnity policies. They don't care whether it's at home and your spouse is taking care of you, or you're in a facility for full-time care. Doesn't matter. The day you qualify, one-time qualification, your doctor says, oh, can't perform 2 of the 6 activities of daily living, you qualify. But you say, well, we're just taking care of them at home. Sounds good. They're going to start paying you that money tax-free. You can use it to pay for your home, for your gas, for your groceries, all the regular stuff around the house. If you go into a facility, it can go to that too. So in the world of long-term care protection, this is my particular favorite. 1, I like putting in 1 and getting back 4, or whatever the number, 3, 3.5, whatever. I like that, because that truly is someone else's money. I do like that. I also like tax-free, because remember we said life is all about living in the net. How much do you end up with? Well, if I pull from an IRA to pay $5,000 a month, I have to pull out about $6,500 a month. Pay my federal, pay my state, and then pay the long-term care facility. And by doing that, I just took out a bunch of money that's going to cause my Social Security to become taxable. If I pull from a life insurance, it doesn't hurt any of that. So for long-term care protection, that's my particular favorite. Now, I don't like variable ones because you can lose money and they cost you a lot of fees. But if you get a good one that's like a guaranteed life or an indexed life where there's lower fees, every insurance product has fees. If they say there's no fees in a life insurance product, there's no way. They can't do that. It's not a good business model. But if you get something like that where you say, I put in 1, they give me back 3 to 4 tax-free, and it'll cover everything. And if I never need it, my spouse gets it or my kids get it. That's worth conversations when long-term care is a big deal. And for that client I told you who had never talked about it and then came in and instantly that's all we could talk about, we started shifting money into an irrevocable trust through a lawyer, and we started buying more life insurance, strictly for the purpose of long-term care protection. They have enough insurance and assets for the spouse. This is just to keep that money for the spouse and pull life insurance to cover the long-term care. So in terms of that, that's my preference, that's what we prefer. When you're doing it this way, you're doing it in a way that the money you put in has 0 risk because it's in an index policy, not a variable policy. It has fees, but so would your brokerage account. I just get tax-free money on the back end. That's why we tend to go that direction with them. And that provides asset protection. It really doesn't care about this stuff because it's just going to pay out. Well, what if we don't even need it? The day you turn it on, they're cutting checks. And then if you're in that same position the next year, they'll continue to cut checks. It's a pretty nice setup.
We're at time, guy.
Huh? Jeez, oh, Pete.
We should pray, and then we can do questions till the food comes.
Well, I'll talk a little bit about this while the food's coming out, okay? The food's, they haven't set up outside the door
They
yet.
got 1 plate. They're loaded.
They got 1.
Yep.
They give us the look. They give us the look, and they're like, hey, listen, stop talking and serve the food. Generational transfer. Setting up beneficiaries on as many things as possible is key. We just don't want to go through probate. Probate it's not the worst thing in the world, it's just one of the most avoidable things in the world. When your assets go through probate, they're subject to generally about a year of legal process in a good setup. You're going to pay about 3 to 5% in fees. So you have $1 million estate. The court, just to do the process, is gonna charge you 30 to 50 grand. It becomes public record, everything that goes through probate. Every single thing that goes through the process is public record. That's also not fun. There's no reason for everybody else to know your business. So you can avoid that using a trust. And there's two different types we're talking about. The long-term care protection, you need an irrevocable trust, which means you're literally removing assets from your estate, putting it into a trust where you don't have complete access to it anymore. There's some benefits to it, and there's some pretty heavy red tape you have to be aware of in that process. But it is an opportunity that you can use. Most people, yes, Steve?
Sorry, is probate a given?
It's not, yes. If you don't label things out the right way, anything that doesn't have a beneficiary on it will go through probate.
Okay, so even if you have no other relatives and you just have your spouse?
Yep.
it's still gonna go-
Right,
Sorry.
right. On things, now, shared property, a home would not go through if a spouse remains, right? But if you go through, like, we have a cottage, and as a result, we have this other car, I have all these toys, this and that, whatever. Well, if it doesn't have a beneficiary on it, it goes through probate. And so as a result, what about my home? I can't put a beneficiary on my home. You can. You can do what's called a quitclaim deed or a ladybird deed, and you put your kids or whomever as a beneficiary on the home. You and your spouse pass, it immediately passes on to the children. And if they want to sell it, they don't have to pay any taxes on the gains if they sell it relatively close to the day of death. So let's just say, for example, we had a client who she passed away January 23rd of 2018. And when she passed away, she had no children, but 13 nieces and nephews.
You're good if they come in? You're good if they come
Yeah,
in?
yeah. Let's pray over the food real quick. God, thank you for the food. Thank you for our chance
He's gonna
come
keep
out to
going while
Capital
people,
Prime.
you can come
Bless
in,
the
no
food to our
worries.
body. Bless the hands that prepared it, and help us to get home safe. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. While they're serving, I'm just going to hit this last little bit. This client had 13 nieces and nephews, and everything was in a trust. And so what we did is we had to go through and walk it all out. But she had bought mutual funds in the 60s and never sold them. So they had grown over the years from $5,000 to $630,000. Pretty incredible. Because they had a step up in basis, they didn't have to pay any taxes on it. They were able to sell it and pay nothing. So there are great strategies using a revocable living trust, an irrevocable living trust, a pour-over will. There's things like that that can be done for relatively inexpensive in the scope of things. Compared to 50 grand of probate, a 5 grand will and trust isn't that bad. So we just have to put it in that scope, because otherwise you get sticker shock when the lawyer tells you 5 grand for a will and trust. What? That's crazy. No, paying 50 grand of probate is crazy.
90% off.
Yeah, it's a big discount. So as a result, that's one of the things you should be aware of. So as we'll bring this to a close, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of pieces that go into retirement planning. It's not an A, B, C answer, because every family is going to have a different model. The things you've been through, the things you want to see in the future, it's all going to change based on your life. So we're here tonight offering one dinner and a consultation, dinner and a coffee, right? We have dinner tonight, and then you come to our office and we talk for about 45 minutes. And in that 45 minutes, we hear your story, where you've come from, where you want to go, and what you want life to look like. And we take a look at your situation. And from there, we say, hey, you know what? You're right on pace. I wouldn't change a thing. Or we say, hey, let's talk about some things, some areas we've covered, or other things you want to talk about, and make sure you have all the education you need to make good choices. There's no cost to the meeting. There's no obligation. It's just us sitting down and talking. And the question people ask the most, there's really two questions. Why don't you charge for the meeting? And will you come to my house? Well, we don't charge for the meeting because we don't nickel and dime. We manage enough money that it makes more sense to find out if we can help you and if you're a good fit with us. So we don't charge for meetings ever. We don't drive, because we have, Lansing's huge, and we have an office in Howell, and we're opening one in Grand Rapids. Like, that's a lot of ground to cover in a day. Versus we're in Okemos, right at the intersection, right at the interchange. So you hop off there, we're right there, and we have all of our staff, all of our resources, and everything we need there. So you come to our office, and we have that chat for about 45 minutes to hear your story. So Katie has our calendar. She's going to come around in a moment and talk to you and make a time for us to get together and chat. If you have any other questions, flag me down. I'll gladly answer them for you. I hope this is beneficial. I enjoyed it. Brian, you didn't really get a chance to talk a lot because I just kept on going. I apologize.
You're used to it.
I am. And so I normally do them by myself, and I was like, Brian, let's do this together. And then he wrote for me, you know. But yeah, so that's what we're offering tonight. Hope you guys come out and enjoy some time where we chat and hear your story. So we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much. Yep. Right. Oh, no, I just want to get a Spotify playing.
I got it.
Okay.
I'm gonna do it on my phone.
Okay.
Oh, is it off? There we go.
Yeah.
You can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Someone told me that when you finally do pull the trigger and activate, it's only good for on average 4 to 5 years,
Right.
not the rest of the time that you're going to be in it.
Correct.
And that's set up because with Medicaid, they go back 5 years.
Well, Medicaid does go back.
Told you,
5
I got
years,
it.
But it's really two separate things. So Medicaid going back 5 years is to make sure you didn't just dump off assets. So like if you gave $1 million to your kid, say, hey, I don't have any money. They're like, what did you do in the last 5 years? Yeah, I did last week. All right, get it back. You know, or they basically keep a ledger and say, until you've paid $1 million of long-term care, you know, they don't pay anything. But in terms of insurance, they do it more from an actuarial standpoint. So when they're saying that you have, generally with long-term care insurance, there's an elimination period, right? Like you have to be confined for 45 or 90 days, and then it'll kick in a daily benefit up to a maximum benefit. It's not about Medicaid, that's more about just an actuarial game where they say, if you want a longer maximum benefit, the premium just has to be paid. You know, if you say, well, I need a discount on premium, no big deal. We can either lower your daily pay or shorten your payout period. So that's just strictly a calculation they use to leverage your premium against how long they think they'll have to pay. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that's all it is. It's just a structuring. So if you don't like one of the elements of it, you can say, hey, I want more dollars per day. Well, then they'll say we can either raise your premium or shorten the duration of payout. Say, well, we'll pay for 2 years if you want $200 a day. But if you'll give us 150, we'll go 3 years, or $100, we'll go 4 years. So it's yeah. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's why I do tend to like the life insurance more. We tend to use it as a like we call it like a proceeds sweep. So let's just say that we build a plan around someone earning about 5% a year. And then you have a good year in the market and you get 10%. Great. We'll take that money above what we planned on, sweep it into a life insurance policy. They're flexible premium. So just whenever you have extra, you can throw into it, monthly, annually, whatever. So really you're just kind of stockpiling the savings account that you don't ever really need. But when you go to take it, they say, hey, here's what you put in, so therefore your payout would be this. And so a lot of our times we'll say, we always solve for your monthly income, your next 5 years income, then about the next 10 years. Anything beyond that, we say, if we can sweep some money into that, because there's the other side. You can also pull from that life insurance, that same tax-free draw, rather than for long-term care, you can just pull it for income. So same model, right? You get a little bit better payout if you do a long-term care. Long-term care, they're going to pay out the whole 96% of the death benefit in like 4 years. If you do income, rather than paying you 90 grand, they'll pay you like 20 grand or a year, but it's tax-free. So that's like a $25,000 401k draw. So, yeah, I tend to think of it that way, rather than like, I have to take a chunk, because really you can't even put a chunk in at one time. So rather than 100 grand, it's more like 20 grand a year for 5 years. Well, where do I get that? Well, if you have 500 grand and you make 10%, we made $50,000. Take 20 of it, throw in the insurance, take the other 30 and live off of it. So that's the type of thing we use. It's a sweet model for us. Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you. It's a new style for us. We could have gone longer. I could have.